The halls of the Zalari Palace gleamed like nothing Elias had ever seen. Light danced off polished crystalline floors, reflecting the deep, iridescent hues of the walls. Strange flora floated in suspended globes, each emitting a soft, calming hum. The air was filled with scents of unfamiliar flowers and minerals, and the very atmosphere seemed alive, almost aware of his presence. Elias had been brought here as part of a diplomatic mission, but standing in the heart of the alien empire, he realized just how different humans were from the beings he now faced. He had seen aliens before in museums and holovids, but nothing prepared him for the living majesty of the Zalari people. They were tall, with delicate, elongated limbs, their skin shifting in patterns like sunlight over water. They moved with a grace that seemed impossible. Their gestures always perfectly balanced, yet for all their elegance, there was a tension in the palace air, as if every movement, every word, was measured and calculated. Elias was guided by two attendants, their translucent wings folding and unfolding with every step. They spoke in a melodic tone, each word echoing like music. "You are nearing the throne room, human," one whispered. "The queen waits." He swallowed hard and nodded. Though he had trained for alien diplomacy, nothing in his preparation had covered meeting a being who ruled an entire empire with a gaze and a thought. The throne room was vast. The ceiling stretched high, a sky of shifting colors, like the northern lights captured in glass. On a raised platform sat the alien queen, Lithera. Her scales shimmered like molten silver and violet, her eyes reflecting galaxies. She did not rise when he entered. Instead, she studied him quietly, her gaze both piercing and curious. Elias stepped forward carefully, his shoes echoing softly against the crystalline floor. "Your Majesty," he said, bowing slightly, "I am Elias, sent from Earth to learn and to share our knowledge." Lithera's voice rang clear and melodic, filling the room effortlessly. "Human, you have traveled far, yet far greater than distance is the journey of understanding. Tell me, who is beautiful in your eyes?" The question struck him. He had expected inquiries about human technology, diplomacy, or culture, but beauty? And yet he realized this was a question worth considering. The court around him held its breath. Courtiers, nobles, and scholars from across the empire waited for his answer, anticipating flattery, fear, or confusion. Elias considered his words carefully. "Your Majesty," he began, "beauty is not simply what one sees with the eyes. It is what one feels, what one observes in actions, in intentions, and in the care one shows for others." A ripple of surprise passed through the hall. Lithera's brows raised slightly, her interest piqued. "Continue," she said softly, almost as if inviting him to step further into a truth rarely spoken aloud in her court. He took a breath and looked around. "I have seen many wonders here. I have walked among your gardens, watched your scholars debate, and seen your artists shape forms that dance with light itself. But what strikes me most is the quiet strength, the care, and the thoughtfulness in every action. That is beauty, not just in form, but in heart, in courage, and in empathy." The queen's eyes widened slightly, her lips parting in a way that suggested genuine surprise. The court was silent. For the first time, the air felt less tense and more electric, charged with curiosity. No human had ever spoken this way before her, and she did not yet know whether to be impressed or cautious. Lithera leaned slightly forward, her scales shimmering in the light. "You do not name a single being human. You speak of qualities. And yet, you look at me while you speak. Do you imply that I am beautiful?" Elias met her gaze steadily. "You are magnificent, Your Majesty. But beauty is not just about how one appears. It is the wisdom with which you rule, the care you show for your people, and the courage you display when making difficult decisions. To me, that is true beauty." A faint smile appeared on Lithera's lips. It was subtle, yet it changed the entire atmosphere of the throne room. She studied him closely, her alien features softening. "You speak as if you have looked beyond appearances, human. How rare." Elias felt a flush of nervousness. He had not expected such a reaction. "I believe," he said carefully, "that all beings, no matter their form, can be beautiful if they act with kindness and courage. I have seen some of your people do remarkable things in the quietest moments. That is more beautiful than the grandest display." The Queen's eyes glimmered with interest, and she tilted her head slightly. "You are not like other humans I have studied. Others tend to speak of conquest, of survival, of ambition. You speak of heart. Tell me, human, have your people always valued these qualities?" Elias thought of Earth, of the many conflicts and kindnesses he had witnessed. "We are learning," he admitted. "Not all humans act with wisdom or compassion, but many do. And those who act with care often inspire others to follow. That, I think, is what makes our species remarkable." Lithera's expression softened further. She motioned to a nearby courtier, who stepped forward with a small holographic display. Images of humans, scientists, explorers, artists, and volunteers flashed in the air. Elias recognized some, people who had risked themselves to save others, who had reached across differences to form understanding. "Do you see, human?" Lithera said. "These deeds, are they what you mean by beauty?" "Yes," Elias replied, nodding. "Beauty is found in courage, compassion, and selflessness. It is found when one chooses to help, to create, and to understand, even when it is difficult." The Queen studied him in silence, and for the first time, Elias saw something unusual in her gaze. Reflection. She was not used to being challenged in thought, and yet she did not recoil. Instead, she seemed intrigued. "You speak wisely, human, perhaps too wisely. Most beings would seek to flatter me to secure favor. You do not. You see deeper." Elias felt a small sense of relief. It was one thing to answer a question correctly. It was another to navigate the subtle expectations of an alien court. "I speak only what I see," he said humbly. Lithera's eyes held his for a long moment. Then she leaned back, the glow of her scales shimmering with a softer light. "Perhaps this is why you are here, not merely to represent your people, but to teach us to see differently. Perhaps humans can remind us that true beauty is not in dominance, nor in display, but in the heart." The court remained quiet, absorbing the unusual exchange. Some whispered among themselves, wondering if this human possessed an insight that even the wisest Zalari had overlooked. Others watched in admiration, noting the calm and measured courage in his words. Elias realized the weight of the moment. He was not just a guest. He had, in a single answer, begun to bridge a gap between two civilizations. One simple truth, one perspective on beauty, was challenging assumptions that had endured for centuries. Lithera's voice broke the silence again. "Human, you have startled me, and yet I wish to hear more. Tell me, in your travels, in your observations, whose actions have you found most beautiful?" Elias hesitated, thinking of all the individuals he had encountered, both human and alien. "It is not always the greatest leaders or the most powerful who show beauty," he said. "Often, it is those who act without expectation, who put others before themselves, and who create harmony where there was discord. That is what I find beautiful." For the first time, the Queen's posture relaxed. Her wings, usually held tightly behind her, flexed slowly, revealing the elegance of her form. "And do you see any being here whose actions fit this description?" Elias looked across the throne room. He saw a young Zalari scholar carefully tending to a floating globe, a nurse quietly attending to the injured without seeking praise, and even a low-ranking attendant offering guidance to another unnoticed by most. "Yes," he said softly, "I see many. But it is not their rank, nor their power, that makes them beautiful. It is their choices, their care, and their courage." Lithera was silent for a long moment. Then she spoke in a tone that was almost personal, almost private. "You have given me something rare today, human, a perspective I had not considered. Perhaps beauty is not a thing to possess, but a choice one makes every day." Elias nodded, feeling a mix of pride and humility. He had not meant to impress the queen. He had only spoken the truth he believed in. Yet now, as he looked at her, he understood that his words had shifted something. The room seemed lighter, more alive, and even the distant hum of the floating flora felt like applause. Lithera's gaze softened once more. "Human, your answer has surprised me. I wonder, if you were not only our guest but our teacher, what more could you show us about your people and about ourselves?" Elias felt a strange warmth at her words, a sense of possibility. The bridge between their worlds had been built, not with technology nor with force, but with thought, insight, and courage. And for the first time, he understood that the most powerful impact one could have in an alien empire was simply to see clearly and to speak the truth. The courtiers whispered, the attendants paused, and the queen remained still, stunned in a way Elias had never expected. The moment stretched, charged with quiet tension and promise. He had answered a simple question, yet it carried a weight far beyond anything he had imagined. And as he stood before her, Elias realized that the journey had only just begun. The question of beauty had opened a door, one that could change the course of the Zalari Empire, and perhaps, in small ways, the course of humanity among the stars. After the exchange in the throne room, the atmosphere of the Zalari Palace had subtly shifted. Whispers of Elias's insight spread quietly among the courtiers. Some were curious, others skeptical, but all sensed that a human had spoken something that resonated in ways they had not expected. The queen, Lithera, remained thoughtful, her brilliant scales dimming and brightening with the rhythm of her contemplation. Elias was escorted to a guest chamber, a place of calm and reflective beauty. Transparent walls overlooked the floating gardens, where flora drifted in gentle arcs and light shimmered across every surface. He sat quietly, trying to process the events that had unfolded. Though he had only answered a question about beauty, he felt as though he had been entrusted with a responsibility far greater than he could measure. A soft chime echoed through the chamber, and Lithera entered, unannounced but silent. She did not wear the rigid posture of a ruler here. Instead, she moved with measured curiosity, her eyes still reflecting distant galaxies. "You have given me much to consider, human," she said softly, settling on a platform near him. "Your perspective on beauty, it challenges everything I have known. And yet I cannot help but wonder, do your people truly live by these ideals you speak of?" Elias nodded slowly. "Not always, Your Majesty, but many try. Every act of care, every choice to help without expectation creates a ripple. Sometimes it changes a life, sometimes a community. And sometimes it can even reach a world far beyond our own." Lithera regarded him in silence, as if weighing each word. Then, with a subtle gesture, she signaled a small holographic display. It projected images of humans in various acts of courage, a volunteer rescuing survivors from a storm, scientists collaborating across continents, teachers mentoring children, doctors saving lives in dangerous conditions. These acts, Elias said, pointing to the images, are simple by human standards, yet they reveal a form of beauty that is rare in any species. It is the choice to act for others, even when there is nothing to gain. That is what I meant when I spoke of courage and heart. The queen studied the images intently, a mixture of wonder and curiosity in her gaze. I see. That beauty is indeed more than form. It is action. It is intention. And you, human, have observed this so clearly. Why do you not fear that speaking such truths here might offend or bring harm? Elias smiled faintly. I do not seek to offend, Your Majesty. I only speak what I see and believe. Sometimes speaking the truth requires courage. Yes, but it is also the way we learn and grow. Lithera nodded slowly, her wings flexing as if acknowledging a quiet lesson learned. Perhaps this is why you were sent here. Not merely to represent your species, but to teach us. To remind us. Days passed, and Elias's presence began to influence more than just the queen. Courtiers approached him with questions, scholars debated ideas he introduced, and even the younger attendants seemed to regard him with a new respect. Yet not all were pleased. Some viewed the human's insight as a challenge to long-held traditions, seeing it as a subtle threat to their authority. One evening, as Elias walked through the floating gardens, a group of courtiers approached him, their expressions a mix of suspicion and curiosity. Human, one said, your words have caused much stir. Do you truly believe your perspective can influence the Zalari Empire? Elias met their eyes calmly. I do not claim to control or change your people. I only share what I see and what I believe is true. If it inspires thought, reflection, or understanding, then perhaps it will have an effect. But the choice to act upon it is yours alone. The courtiers exchanged glances, uncertain whether to dismiss him or consider his words seriously. One of them, an older scholar with deep green scales, finally spoke. It is unusual, a being so far from our world, yet seeing so clearly. Perhaps there is value in this exchange, if only to remind us of what we overlook. Elias nodded, appreciating the cautious acknowledgement. He realized that understanding did not come instantly. It grew slowly, nurtured by dialogue and reflection. Meanwhile, the queen invited Elias to participate in a council meeting, a gathering of the empire's most influential leaders. The chamber was vast, circular, and filled with holographic projections of star systems, trade routes, and demographic statistics. As the discussion turned to political strategy, some leaders subtly sought to use Elias's favor with the queen to their advantage. One ambitious noble proposed a plan that prioritized expansion and conquest, hoping to gain favor by aligning with the human's perspective. Elias listened carefully, noting the nuances of their motivations. When the opportunity arose, he spoke, not to criticize, but to offer insight. Expansion and conquest can demonstrate strength, he said, but true influence comes from trust, understanding, and cooperation. A society that values these qualities builds connections that endure far longer than those imposed by force. A hush fell over the chamber. Leaders exchanged glances, and even the ambitious noble paused, considering Elias's words. The queen's eyes met his, a subtle acknowledgement passing between them. She valued his judgment not because it flattered her, but because it reflected clarity and honesty. The council continued, and gradually, more leaders began to engage in discussion beyond their usual self-interest. They debated ways to foster collaboration with neighboring systems, to promote education and cultural exchange, and to create policies that would benefit the many rather than the few. Elias felt a quiet satisfaction, knowing that even small perspectives could shift the course of decisions in meaningful ways. Later, in the Queen's private chamber, Lithera addressed him. "Human, you have given more than insight. You have reminded us that influence is not taken by force but earned through understanding. And yet, I sense you have more to offer. Tell me, do your people face challenges like ours?" Elias considered her question carefully. "Every civilization faces challenges, Your Majesty, but what makes humans different, perhaps, is our resilience. Even in hardship, we find ways to care, to create, and to persevere. That resilience, paired with the choice to act with heart, is what I believe makes us remarkable." Lithera's gaze softened, her usually sharp and commanding features reflecting thoughtfulness. "Remarkable indeed. I see why you speak so confidently. You are not merely an observer. You understand. And perhaps that is the gift of your presence here." As days turned into weeks, Elias's relationship with the Queen deepened, not as ruler and subject, but as minds exchanging understanding. They discussed philosophy, art, leadership, and ethics. Through their dialogue, Lithera began to reconsider her assumptions about the nature of beauty, power, and the responsibilities of rule. One afternoon, the Queen summoned the human to a balcony overlooking the central city of the Zelari capital. Towers of crystalline light reached toward the sky, and streets shimmered with flowing energy patterns. Citizens moved with purpose and grace, unaware of the quiet conversation above. "Human," Lithera said, "your presence has sparked change, not just in words, but in action. Some of our people are beginning to see differently, to choose differently. And yet, you have not sought to take credit, nor to impose. How do you measure success in such endeavors?" Elias smiled faintly. "Success is not measured in recognition, Your Majesty. It is measured in whether understanding grows, whether actions reflect care and courage, and whether even a small shift can lead to better outcomes. Influence is subtle, not always immediate, but it is real." Lithera nodded thoughtfully. "Then perhaps this is the human way, quiet, patient, yet profoundly impactful. I understand now why you speak of beauty in ways we rarely consider. It is not in the form, nor the power, but in the choices and courage of the heart." As the sun-like energy of the city cast shimmering reflections across their faces, Elias felt a sense of purpose. He had come to an alien empire as a guest, yet he realized that humans possessed a gift beyond technology or strength. Their empathy, creativity, and capacity for understanding could bridge worlds, inspire change, and awaken reflections even in beings far older and wiser than themselves. The Queen turned to him, her voice soft but firm. "Human, you have reminded me that true beauty is not a gift of birth, nor a display of power. It is a choice, a reflection of courage, empathy, and understanding. And perhaps humanity, in its imperfect yet earnest ways, can teach even the mightiest of empires what it means to be truly remarkable." Elias bowed his head slightly, humbled by her words. "Thank you, Your Majesty. It is not a gift, but a shared understanding, and it is my hope that both our worlds can learn from one another." The city below them continued to hum with life, yet above, in the quiet of the balcony, a bond had been forged, not of allegiance, nor of convenience, but of insight and respect. The alien queen had been stunned by his answer, and in that moment, Elias realized that humanity's true power lay not in dominance, but in the ability to see clearly, to act with heart, and to inspire understanding across the stars. And as the first glow of the distant moons reflected on the shimmering cityscape, Elias knew that this was only the beginning. The question of beauty had opened doors, created bridges, and planted seeds of change. For the first time in the history of the Zalari Empire, the human mind had become a mirror, showing that even in the vastness of the universe, true beauty and courage could be recognized, respected, and cherished.